If you're curious the secrets to food combining from Ayurvedic perspective, then in this episode we are going to share about the 7 Ayurvedic tips on food combining. Hi, this is Zia and this is
Kimmana, and welcome to Holistic Nomads TV,
where ancient wisdom and modern science can help you to have more clarity and energy in your life. I can hear so many people out there cheering that we finally make this topic, Ayurvedic food combining, because I get asked a lot online and in person about food combining, so finally we're going to cover that in this episode. So the first question is food combining is even important as part of the diet, nutrition from Ayurvedic perspective? Because I know that there is this, priority, and the first one is how we eat it. So how important will this topic will be?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why we've held back the food combining for a while, because when it comes to good digestion, there's other things that are much more important. The first one is the lifestyle of how you eat. So we've got a video on that, 7 tips for drinking and 7 tips for eating. They will influence your metabolism, your general lifestyle there. The next one is your Agni, your own metabolic function, and whether or not it's going towards an imbalanced tendency. So your own ability to digest and transform things is referred to as Agni in Ayurveda. Again, we've got videos that relate to Agni, how to diagnose and assess your Agni. And then we have another thing that is like the antithesis, the enemy of Agni is Ama. Poor metabolism means we get half digested byproducts. And the more Ama, the more food combining becomes really important. So this is where we're going to start to now talk about food combining as the add-on to these things, the add-on to a good lifestyle of eating, the add-on to fine-tuning your own individual digestive tendency is to know, oh, okay, my Agni level is quite high, therefore I can sort of play with the food combining principles a little bit. I don't need to be so strict with them because my digestive system is functioning really well and I don't have so much Ama, half-digested byproducts. So if you're unsure about what Ama is, there's a whole video on that. There's a test to define that. If you have more Ama inside your body, then you are much more likely to get reactive food sensitivities, allergies, all of those things, because those half-digested byproducts are floating in the system and the immune system starts to attack them, and then all of these food combining principles become much more important to be able to reduce Ama. So yes, food combining is important for everyone, and if you can, stick to the principles below. And it's not needed at every meal all of the time, depending on your own ratio of health and how you're naturally metabolizing those foods.
Yeah, I like that you emphasize that people can be flexible, because the first one actually that I'm gonna say, that we're gonna share, and many, depends on the person obviously, is the things that will make many food actually tasty. Like for example, banana milkshake.
Banana milkshake, the classic. So our first one starts with milk and dairy. So Ayurveda used milk and dairy a lot as a medicine. And I think it's important to draw the distinction here between the milk that they had from possibly one specific cow that was only producing milk just after the period where it was pregnant and it had a calf there, compared to the milk that we have today, the modern factory farmed milk. These are very different things. So I don't necessarily recommend milk as medicine for a lot of people anymore. I try to decrease the consumption of milk and dairy for most people, because this overproduced factory farmed milk with hormones and other things is not the same form of naturally easily digestible. Yet if you are using it, Ayurveda would highly recommend that milk would be cooked with water and some digestive spices and eaten alone. It generally doesn't combine with a lot of other things. And then the specific not so great combinations are fruit. So combining milk with fruit tends to create a fermentation process inside the gut, enhances negative bacterial environments, and particularly banana and milk has a lot of mucus forming properties. They're both mucus forming foods, so that can really aggravate. In the traditional classical thought, dates are considered to be okay combined with milk. So if you're looking for a little sweetener there, for some form of milk drink, dates could be an ideal option there to be able to steer away from the sugar. And then also our fish, meat, yogurt, and any of the yeasted breads or grains also don't combine so well with milk. So the classic glass of milk with your sandwich in the morning or something, really not such a great food combination, much more likely to lead towards allergies and intolerances to milk and allergies and intolerances to wheat because they won't digest so well together in the body.
The next part of the 7 tips of a food combining is yogurt. So the first question is why you need to differentiate between milk and yogurt, because that's part of dairy, isn't it?
Yeah, yogurt has been a fermented source of dairy, so some of the sugars that are in there have started to be eaten down, so people that don't digest lactose as well may be able to tolerate yogurt much easier. And then its combining things are still fairly similar here. This is what we're going off here is from Ayurveda.com and Dr. Vasant Ludd's school, the Ayurvedic Institute in New Mexico, and we've adapted some of the information from there. So he makes this distinction between milk and yogurt because there is a few differences here. So fruit, particularly again, but with milk it was banana is the most challenging one. With yogurt it's the citrus varieties that are the most challenging. They've already gone through a souring of the milk, so now when we add something that's very sour towards that, particularly lemons and limes, then that can really create challenges within the digestion of the yogurt. They're too similar and have an acidic effect and create a lot of fermentation and other byproducts there. So fruits, especially the citrus. And then we can also say the same as we did for the meats, for the milk, where we have fish, milk, cheese, eggs, meat, all of these will come under the not so ideal to mix with it. So yogurt mixed with cheese, not such a great combo.
Yum.
Yum,
I remember, what is that? Fish and yogurt is a very common thing when I lived in Turkey in 2010. And now I knew this principle. I can see why I gained 5 kilos after living there, because the food combination that is commonly, when I eat it outside, is yogurt is everywhere and very commonly mixed with fish.
Yeah, fish and yogurt. I think in one of the classical texts, I think it's the Sushruta Samhita, they label as the most important negative digestive processes were banana and milk and fish and milk. So they were the highlights for negative food combinations.
The third tip is relating with melon.
Yeah, so generally all fruits are better digested alone, yet melons most specifically, they really don't digest so well with other fruits, other foods, particularly grains, cheese and fried foods. The melons will really create a negative digestive process there.
Who eats melon and grains together?
Melons and grains. Grains go with almost every meal for most of the culture.
Rice and melon?
Well, usually it's going to be in a dessert or something.
Okay.
They'll have some form of fruit mixed together in some form of dessert, and that's how it would normally happen.
True, actually I remember oftentimes when we eat out, usually in European country, isn't it? And then after we eat a full meal that usually comes with grains, then at the end is watermelon dessert or the melon dessert.
Yeah. Classic melon dessert, especially because it's so cheap. So many restaurants are like, oh, I can give you a free bonus of melons. They're one of the cheap fruits.
Cool. Not cool. The fourth one is nightshades. Now, before we talk about the food combining of nightshades, can you tell us a little bit about nightshade itself? What is it? Nightshades
are a family of plants, and the most common ones that we eat for food are going to be like potatoes, tomatoes, and eggplant. Here when we say potatoes, we're not looking at sweet potatoes, they're a different family, so we're looking at our conventional white-styled potatoes. And this family, this group, has a certain high amounts of salicylates and other specific ingredients inside them that people often need to avoid. Sometimes it can aggravate pitta, yet they can be very beneficial for vata as well, so it's not like a negative for everyone. They do have some specific things. It's yogurt, milk, cucumbers and melons are the things that they don't digest so well with.
Next one, the fifth one is starches.
The starches, so we're looking at grains here, potatoes, a lot of those things. They don't digest so well with fruits, particularly bananas and dates. The starches don't go well together, and milk and eggs. And when we look at that, it's such a common combination to look at pancakes, bakery things where they would use eggs to create the raising agent there. So we're not saying, again, like I said at the beginning, you can't ever eat these foods. What we're saying is if that is your regular consumption, if every day you eat a pastry croissant or something where it's got wheat and egg mixed together to make that croissant, then it's much more likely to create AMA, half-digested byproducts. And then that's going to create a problem long term. So it just can't be your daily foods what we're eating here. And if you have a strong digestive disorder, then you may need to eliminate it for a period of time to clear out the AMA and get the Agni back on again. In relation to starches and fruits, particularly here we're talking about if they're cooked together as well, that will aggravate the principle even more. If you have a very even ratio between the starches and the fruits, then that can aggravate and create more fermentation problems.
Number 6, lemons.
Yeah, lemons. Yeah. They don't go so well with milk, as we've already mentioned, and also the yogurt milk fruit combination, not so ideal with lemons and something that's really sour. And the other one is cucumbers and tomatoes. If you're going for a salad and you've got some form of fresh tomato that's through that, then generally you won't need so much of a lemon sour type dressing. That's not the best combination that goes on there. A lemon sour type dressing when you're not having tomatoes at the salad will be more ideal.
And the last one, what about fruits? Now we already talked a tiny bit here and there about fruits, so seems like fruit is a big thing when it comes to like food combining. So let's summarize that into the last point, the 7th part.
Yeah, if I'm giving someone a face-to-face super quick summary on food combining, I usually just do 3 points. I usually just go milk, yeah, and banana, no. Dairy and fish, no. And fruits, eat them alone. That's usually my 3 principles I go with here. So this brings us to the fruit here, which you've seen has not combined so well with many other foods here. So fruits have a very quick digestive time. They like to be in the stomach for 5 to 20 minutes, depending on what type of fruit it is and how fast your digestive system is. Many other foods have a much longer digestive time. So when we put them together, the fruits get over-digested and the other food, the proteins, the carbohydrates tend to get under-digested. So they don't combine so well. They're best eaten as standalone snacks between meals. Now, it's very common to use fruits for a sweetener in different meals. I use some dried fruits within my porridge, or sometimes I'll chop up a little bit of apple and stew that into the porridge. The key thing here is that your Agni's functioning well, the AMA is not so high, and then the ratio of how much you're mixing, let's say some starches or something, with that fruit. And the more that it's like 80 to 90% or quite a bit of the starch and just a tiny bit of fruit, then it's not going to be so imbalanced with the digestive system. Or vice versa, 90–95% of the fruit and just a tiny bit of the starch, a tiny bit of Bircher muesli or something with a decent amount of fruit, then it's much more likely to digest quite easily in the body because it will favor digesting that one specific category and it won't be so negative. Whereas if it's an even ratio of fruit and oatmeal or something, then it's much more likely to challenge the system. So best eaten alone. Stewed fruits are more okay to mix with something if you've boiled them up for a period of time by themselves, not cooking them together, and then you could add a little bit of that stewed fruit as like a fruit compote onto something as a sweetener. This is like chutneys, so they use a lot of different chutneys within Indian cooking. It's a small amount of that fruit that's used as a stewed type chutney dish, and then a little bit is added as a sweetener, some form of pickle or sour thing that's in there too. And the other fruit combination that's in the classics that's okay is date and milk. Generally works quite fine together.
Okay, so that's the 7 tips on food combining from Ayurvedic perspective. I'm actually wondering, is this food combining also backed up from like modern science? Is there any, correlation between the two?
There is quite a few things that are being backed up and confirmed with modern science. And it's taking time for some of that research to be done because it's a very individual thing, and a person's immune system may react to them, they may overspread into other parts of the body. The most specific things that a lot of modern food combining experts look at is the relationship between proteins and starches and how they have a very different digestive process. So when we look at proteins, starches, carbohydrates, and carbohydrates, if we look at fruits, they like to digest very quickly and be through the body. They start their digestion, carbohydrates, in the mouth with the saliva. There's enzymes, amylase, and others that start digesting the carbohydrates straight away, and those enzymes like to work in an alkaline environment. Luckily, they can work really quickly because when they hit the stomach, it's an acidic environment in the stomach. It's designed to digest proteins. So as long as they make contact with all the carbohydrates and starches, their enzyme very quickly starts to digest that and break it down and finishes off what it needs to do there. Yet you need to make sure you chew every mouthful, even if it's juice. You need to coat it with saliva, those carbohydrates, those sweet foods, and make sure that saliva contacts every bit so that that carbohydrate can digest properly before it reaches the stomach. If we include proteins in what we're eating, then there's going to be a higher ratio of hydrochloric acid in the stomach, making it even more important for this carbohydrate to get digested first. So often in modern food combining, they just try to separate these foods. Intense protein foods, especially meats, combined with carbohydrates or fruits, they will tend to not digest so well together because one will stimulate high hydrochloric acid, acidic environment in the stomach. The other one's looking for an alkaline environment as it gets digested from the mouth and down. So that's our number one, carbohydrates and proteins. That can be influenced by how much you chew as well, so not needed all the time, especially if you have a healthy digestive system. The second one that's being backed up by modern understandings of food combining is what's called glycation end products. And these are somewhat associated with armor, half-digested byproducts that are really difficult for our body to use and utilize. And what's happened here in a molecular sense is that the fats and the proteins, when they get cooked with a carbohydrate, they bind together to create glycation end products. And these are very difficult for our body to break down and use. They usually end up floating throughout the system. They create blockages in the system. They're very much linked to diabetes because they block the insulin receptors throughout the body. So they are formed to a much higher amount when we are cooking at high temperatures, carbohydrates and fats, or carbohydrates and proteins. They're the burnt byproducts. So if we burn toasts, then that's got lots of glycation end products. The proteins and the carbohydrates inside that got overheated, they stuck together and they became very difficult to digest. Not so good to eat a lot of burnt carbohydrates like that. Also, if you're having the French Swiss fondue and there's that stuff that gels to the bottom, the cheese starts to cook to the bottom. In Switzerland they call it the religious. They love to eat this off the bottom. That's glycation end products. The sweetness within inside the cheeses has bonded with the fats and the proteins in a way that makes it really difficult to digest. So this is one of the things to avoid, is glycation end products and overcooking carbohydrates, fats and proteins. A slow, gentle boil with some water in there so it never gets above 100 degrees is going to decrease glycation end products. They've also discovered that the sugar that makes glycation end products the most is fructose. So when fructose is combined with proteins or fats and cooked at a high temperature, it's much more likely to create this. And in a lot of our processed foods, it's a high fructose corn syrup that's used and combined and cooked with many other packaged foods to create these cheap processed foods, meaning they're much higher in these glycation end products. Poor food combining principle going on, much more likely to damage the digestive system with a lot of that pre-processed high fructose corn syrup things that you get. Also, Ayurveda has a food combining principle with honey and the way in which it's cooked. They say that when we cook with honey, it can become toxic to the body. It loses its naturally really beneficial antibacterial properties when we cook it. We know that from modern science too. Yet when we cook it in Ayurveda, they say it becomes more toxic. I think this is mostly due to when it's cooked with proteins or fats. At those times when it's cooked together, honey is high in fructose, making it a much easier exchange to create these glycation end products, which then can create this toxicity, this armor inside the body through that bonding together. Hope that wasn't too much overloading with the science towards the end there.
So
yeah.
nerdy there.
Yeah, we got into the modern science perspective.
So in summary is,
yeah.
there's these 7 tips on food combining that can get a little bit too details for some people, and so basically if you can't remember the all 7 and what is that, what is this, first do the 7 tips on eating and drinking, and that is the most important part, how you do it. Secondly is, if you can't remember these 7 tips on food combining, as Kimmana said, they are the top 3 one, and the first one, no banana and milk. Second one, no milk and fish, and the third one is about the
fruits, eat fruits alone.
Yeah, that's the summary. Can't remember the 7, stick to the 3.
Yeah.
Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, it's really great to get this subject out there for people, and we'll be making this into an A4 chart so you can put it on your fridge and it can be really easy to remember. So if you'd like to download that A4 chart, check out in the links below and you'll be able to find it there.
Now, theory without practice is wasteful, because hearing leads to forgetting, teaching leads to remembering, and applying leads to mastering. That's why we will encourage you to leave a comment below and share one learning insight from this video. Also, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you will be the first to hear about our future educational videos. And for more resources on health and healing, check out our website holisticnomads.com. There you will find articles, quizzes on Ayurveda, loads of free downloads, and of course our future events and courses. Thank you so much for watching. We hope it's been beneficial for you. Hope to see you next week. Bye.
That's it. It's really great to finally get this subject out there for people. And if you're in, I don't know.
Repeat.